For years, Amara had carried one dream in her heart: freedom. Not the loud kind, with champagne toasts and flashing cameras, but the quiet kind that comes from holding a certificate in your hands. Please stay with me as I tell you Amara's story. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel for your support. Means the world to us. Now back to my story. Proof that your long nights, your hunger, your sweat, and your sacrifices were not in vain. That certificate was more than paper to her. It was a key to the life she had always wanted: a stable job, her own income, and the ability to stand on her own without depending on anyone else. It was the future her parents had prayed for, the future she had whispered to herself about in the darkness of her small room during exams. When the day finally came and she held it, her chest swelled with pride. She traced the embossed letters with trembling fingers, smiling at how something so fragile could hold the weight of so many years. Her friends cheered, her family celebrated, and for once, Amara allowed herself to believe she was stepping into a world that would welcome her efforts. She believed nothing could take that away from her. She was wrong, because in the shadows of her joy, there was already a storm brewing. A storm that wore the face of the man she had promised her life to. The man she thought would celebrate her victories with her. He smiled when she showed him the certificate. He kissed her forehead, told her how proud he was. But behind his eyes, something dark flickered. A shadow she did not yet understand. That paper would not only test her worth, it would test her marriage, her strength, and her very will to fight for the life she deserved. At first, Kohler had been everything Amara thought she needed. Charming, attentive, quick to laugh. He was the kind of man who made the world feel safe. When he looked at her, she felt visible in a way she never had before. He encouraged her through exams, even stayed up late to quiz her on difficult topics. He seemed proud of her determination. But as the months passed, subtle changes crept in like cracks in glass. Every time she spoke about applying for a job, his smile tightened. His tone, once warm, grew sharp. "You don't need to stress yourself," he would say. "I provide everything. Stay home, rest. That's what wives do." At first, she laughed it off, believing it was just his way of caring. But the more she pressed, the more his words shifted from suggestions to commands. One evening, over dinner, she tried again. "There's an opening at the firm near the bank. I think I should apply." Kohler slammed his fork down, the clatter echoing through the room. "Amara," I said, "no. Why is it so hard for you to understand that I don't want you working?" Her throat went dry. She wanted to ask why, to understand his sudden anger, but his glare froze the words inside her. Instead, she nodded, swallowing the storm brewing in her chest. That night, as she lay awake beside him, she stared at the ceiling and clutched her certificate to her chest like a secret. For the first time, she felt a flicker of fear. Kohler wasn't just discouraging her. He was determined to stop her. The first time Amara noticed the change, it was small. She had left a job listing open on the dining table, highlighted in yellow. By the time she returned from the kitchen, the paper was gone. Kohler sat in his chair, scrolling his phone as if nothing had happened. When she asked about it, he smiled faintly. "Why waste time chasing dreams when you already have everything you need right here?" His words sounded like honey, but underneath was a warning. Soon, the small things multiplied. Whenever she mentioned her certificate, his jaw would tighten. When she spoke about interviews, he interrupted, reminding her of all the bills he paid, the roof over her head. His refrain was always the same: "I provide. You don't need to work." Amara began to feel her voice shrinking. She had fought for years to earn her independence. Yet here she was, being told it was unnecessary. At night, she held her certificate in her hands, tracing the embossed letters as though reminding herself it was real, that her dream wasn't a fantasy. But the cracks widened. One afternoon, she found her applications, carefully filled and stacked on her desk, crumpled in the trash. Her chest burned as she smoothed out the papers, fighting back tears. When she confronted him, his tone was sharp. "I said I don't want a wife chasing jobs. Why is that so hard to respect?" Respect, the word stung. Respect for him meant silence for her. Amara didn't answer. She knew the argument was already lost. But in the quiet, a thought bloomed like a spark. If he was willing to destroy her papers, what else might he destroy to keep her under his control? The smell hit her before she even opened the door, a sharp, acrid sting that made her throat tighten. Amara dropped her bag and rushed inside, her heels clattering against the floor. Smoke curled from the living room, thin but unmistakable. Her eyes fell to the coffee table, and her heart stopped. There, in a shallow metal tray, lay the blackened remains of her certificate. The edges were curled and glowing faintly, ashes spilling onto the floor like dark snow. The paper she had fought for, the symbol of her freedom, was nothing more than dust. Kohler stood nearby, arms folded, face as calm as if he had just finished a chore. He didn't look at her until she cried out, stumbling forward as if she could save what was already lost. "Why?" Her voice cracked, raw with disbelief. "Why would you do this?" He exhaled slowly, his eyes cold. "Because you don't listen. Because you need to understand that your place is here, with me, not in some office, not chasing a life that doesn't belong to you." Tears blurred her vision. She dropped to her knees, reaching for the ashes with trembling hands. They smeared against her skin, staining her fingers grey. Years of sacrifice, of study, of sleepless nights, all gone in minutes. "I did this for us," she whispered, her voice breaking. "No," he said flatly. "You did it for yourself. And I won't let you make the same mistake my mother did." The words slipped out before he could stop them, sharp and bitter. But Amara was too broken to question them. All she could see were ashes, and all she could feel was the fire of betrayal. 4 days after the burning, the house was quiet, suffocatingly so. Amara drifted through the rooms like a ghost, her steps heavy, her eyes hollow. The certificate had not only been paper, it had been her proof of survival, of struggle, of worth. And now it was gone, reduced to ash because the man she trusted feared what it represented. She barely ate. She barely spoke. Sometimes she sat on the edge of the bed with the charred fragments of her certificate folded into a small box, as though keeping the ashes close could keep the dream alive. Kohler moved around her as if nothing had happened. He whistled while shaving in the mornings, hummed when he returned from work. At night, he reached for her, but she turned away, clutching the blanket-like armor. "You'll thank me one day," he said once, his voice calm but chilling. "You'll see that I saved you from yourself." His words sliced deeper than fire. Saved her? From what? Her own ambition, her own independence. She wanted to scream, to rage, to throw the box of ashes in his face. But her voice felt locked in her throat, trapped beneath the weight of his control. The neighbors noticed her absence. Her family called, asking why she no longer spoke about interviews. She lied, ashamed to tell them the truth. How could she explain that the man she married had destroyed the very thing she had built her life upon? At night, when the house sank into silence, she pressed her palms together and whispered into the darkness, "God, give me strength." For now, she was shattered. For now, she was silent. But deep inside, something small and stubborn still burned. Amara's silence didn't mean surrender, though Kohler believed he had broken her. A quiet determination had begun to stir within her. Every time she opened the small box where the ashes of her certificate lay, her grief sharpened into resolve. He had burned the paper, yes, but he could not burn her knowledge, her years of study, her right to rise again. She started small. While Kohler was at work, she searched online for ways to request a replacement. It wasn't easy: forms, fees, signatures, but each click of the mouse felt like rebellion. She reached out to old professors, explaining her situation in cautious words, careful not to reveal too much. To her surprise, some responded with compassion, offering to send her copies of transcripts and letters of verification. At night, when Kohler slept, she pulled out notebooks and began reviewing old notes. The dim light of her lamp became a quiet witness to her determination. Her pen scratched furiously across the page, each line a promise that she would not let him bury her future. Even money became a secret project. She started saving coins and small bills, slipping them into an envelope hidden deep inside her wardrobe. Every deposit was a seed of freedom, a step toward the day she would walk into an interview and reclaim her life. From the outside, she seemed obedient. She smiled when Kohler dismissed her ambitions, nodded when he boasted about being the sole provider. But inside, she was building. He thought he had silenced her, but Amara was writing a story he would never be able to erase. By day, Amara played the role he wanted, the dutiful wife who cooked his meals, smiled at his stories, and nodded whenever he reminded her that a woman's place is in her home. She let him believe she was broken, that the ashes of her certificate had killed her ambition. But by night, the truth unfolded. When the house was quiet and Cola's snores rumbled from the bedroom, Amara would slip to her desk. There, by the glow of her laptop screen, she filled out applications with trembling but determined fingers. She typed her achievements from memory, attached scanned copies of her transcripts, and pressed submit. Each application felt like a whisper of defiance, like reclaiming the pieces of herself he had tried to burn away. She began receiving emails, polite acknowledgements, occasional invitations to interviews. She printed them and tucked them into the pages of old cookbooks, knowing Cola would never look there. The kitchen became her vault, her dreams hidden among recipes and flour-stained pages. Her savings envelope thickened, coin by coin, note by note. Whenever Cola handed her cash for groceries, she would trim the list, pocketing the difference. To him, it was nothing. To her, it was power. And when her replacement certificate finally arrived in the mail, sealed in a stiff white envelope, she nearly wept with relief. She didn't open it immediately. Instead, she pressed it to her chest, whispering a silent vow, "You tried to erase me, but here I am, rising again." She was no longer waiting for permission. She was preparing for war. The storm came sooner than she expected. One evening, Amara returned from the market to find Cola seated in the living room, her laptop open on his lap. The glow from the screen illuminated his face, twisted, dark, unreadable. She froze at the doorway, the bag of vegetables slipping from her hands. On the screen was an email. "We are pleased to invite you for an interview." The silence stretched until it felt like the walls would collapse. Then Cola's voice cut through the air, low and venomous. "You think you're clever, don't you?" Amara's pulse hammered in her ears. "Cola, don't you dare," he snapped, slamming the laptop shut. He stood, towering over her. "After everything I've done for you, after I destroyed that certificate so you'd finally understand your place, you still disobey me?" His rage poured out like fire. He overturned the coffee table, sent the vegetables scattering across the floor. His hands clenched into fists, and for the first time, Amara thought he might strike her. But instead, he leaned in, his words colder than a blade. "You will not work. You will not embarrass me. Do you hear me?" Amara's body trembled, but her eyes didn't lower. She swallowed her fear, the fire in her chest louder than the pounding of her heart. "I hear you," she said quietly. Then, after a beat, she added, "But I won't stop." His nostrils flared. Shock flickered across his face, not at her defiance, but at the fact that she no longer feared him. That night, the house didn't sleep. He paced, muttering under his breath. She sat in silence, her hand pressed against the sealed envelope of her replacement certificate hidden beneath her clothes. The battle lines had been drawn. The next morning, the house was heavy with silence. Cola sat by the window, his hands clasped, eyes fixed on nothing. For once, his anger looked hollow, almost fragile. Amara moved carefully, unsure if he would erupt again. But then he spoke, his voice low, almost breaking. "You don't understand," he said. "You think this is about control, about power. But it's not. It's about survival." She frowned, unsure what he meant. He let out a bitter laugh. "My mother. She worked her whole life. She chased promotions, business trips, endless hours at the office. And me? I was just there, a shadow in my own home. She missed every birthday, every school play. I grew up watching her choose her career over me, every single time. I swore I would never live like that again." His eyes darkened. "When you talk about jobs, interviews, careers, all I see is her. All I feel is that same emptiness, that same abandonment. I burned her certificate because I couldn't let history repeat itself. I won't lose you the way I lost her." Amara's breath caught. For a moment, she saw not the tyrant who had caged her, but a broken boy still carrying the wounds of neglect. His fear was raw, real, but it was also twisted, poisoning everything around him. She knelt a few steps away, her voice steady but firm. "Cola, your past is not my future. I am not your mother, and you cannot chain me to your pain." His face hardened again, his vulnerability retreating behind walls of pride. But the damage was done, his truth was out. And for Amara, it only confirmed what she already knew. His fear was his prison. but she would not let it become hers. That night, Amara lay awake, staring at the ceiling while Cola's confession replayed in her mind. She understood his pain now, the boy who longed for a mother's attention, who grew up in the shadow of neglect. But she also knew something else. His trauma did not excuse his cruelty. His fear might explain why he acted the way he did, but it could never justify the ashes of her dreams. The next week, her replacement certificate arrived. The envelope felt heavy in her hands, not because of its weight, but because of what it meant, a second chance. She pressed it to her chest, tears streaming silently down her face. When Cola noticed the envelope, panic flickered in his eyes. "You can't. You won't," he began, his voice trembling with rage and desperation. Amara stood tall, her voice calm but unyielding. "I will. You burned one, but you can't burn me. I won't live chained to your fears." She packed her belongings that evening. The clothes, the books, the small envelope of savings she had hidden away. Each item was a piece of her freedom. Cola hovered in the doorway, torn between anger and pleading. "Amara, don't leave me. I only wanted to protect us." She met his gaze, her eyes steady. "No, Cola, you only wanted to protect yourself. And in doing that, you destroyed us." With her bag on her shoulder and her certificate in hand, she stepped outside. The cool night air brushed against her skin like a blessing. For the first time in years, she felt light, unchained. Behind her, Cola's shadow stayed trapped in the doorway. Ahead of her, the world opened wide. Amara walked forward, into freedom, into strength, into her own life. Months later, Amara sat at her desk in a sunlit office. The hum of computers and the shuffle of papers filling the air around her. Her name was printed neatly on the door. Her title etched below it, proof that she had made it, not just into a job, but into the life she had fought for. The one that had been reduced to ashes and rebuilt with her own hands. Sometimes, in quiet moments, her mind drifted back to Cola. She wondered if he still paced their old house, clinging to his fears like chains. She no longer felt anger, only a distant pity. He had chosen to let his trauma consume him, but she had chosen differently. On her desk sat a framed photo, not of him, but of her certificate, restored and shining. To anyone else, it might have looked ordinary, but to her, it was a crown, a shield, a reminder that no one could burn her spirit again. Her colleagues respected her. Her family beamed with pride. She was finally seen, not as someone's wife or someone's possession, but as Amara, strong, independent, and free. One evening, as she packed her things to leave, a colleague asked if she would like to join them for dinner. Amara smiled, realizing how different she felt now, lighter, unbound. As she stepped outside, the evening breeze brushed against her face, the same way it had the night she left Cola. Only this time, she didn't feel like she was escaping. She felt like she was arriving. The fire that once destroyed her certificate had tried to consume her future. Instead, it forged her into something greater. Amara had risen from the ashes, and she was unstoppable. Thank you for watching till the end. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.